Okay, I'm ready. I'm not by nature a very adventurous person, although I'm often mistaken for one. The truth is, most of the adventure in my life has happened by accident, so I'm going to share with you how I learned to be adventurous. Also titled The Slowest Way to Get from Alaska to Tennessee, and a few things I learned along the way. But I'm going fast. Everyone has a story. Mine started here in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. I spent 7 years of my childhood growing up in a little Quonset hut on the tundra, with no trees, very few people, and a black beach for my front yard. I didn't know that was adventurous, because at the time it just seemed normal to me. I grew up without a TV and before the internet, but I had a mother who read to me and a dad who told me stories about growing up on a farm, and I read stories in my school books about people like Dick and Jane. And the more I heard and saw, the more I learned that not only was my life not normal, it was actually kind of strange. I started to realize that growing up with moose as regular visitors wasn't normal everywhere. I used to wonder what it'd be like to live somewhere with white picket fences and paved streets, what it would be like to have my dad put on a hat and go to work in the morning instead of flying off in an airplane to hunt for our dinner. I started to want to experience someone else's normal. Even my name wasn't normal. I used to sign my diary with a different name every night. Amy, Lisa, nice, normal, two-syllable names that nobody got confused about or asked you to repeat. And somewhere along the way, I decided it was a good thing, that having an unusual name gave me something unusual to live up to. I was the original Princess Tianna. I lived in a big state, but a small world. Thankfully, I had a huge imagination. I knew there was a big world out there that I wanted to see, even though it scared me to death. But in the end, I was more afraid of what I would miss out on than I was of the unknown. My curiosity and my imagination propelled me past my fear. And that's how I ended up going to a college in the Midwest that I'd never visited, where I didn't know a soul. That's how I decided I didn't want to be an accountant, I wanted to be a graphic designer. I needed something with more imagination. And that's when I learned that if you don't know where to go, you follow what you love. I didn't know if I had what it took to be a graphic designer. I just knew creating beauty was what I wanted to do. So I graduated, and I spent 3 years back in Alaska working hard to establish myself as a designer. And when I'd gone as far as I could go in one place, I decided I wanted to travel, wanted to do something worthwhile, and I wanted it to have something to do with a boat. The summer I turned 26, I ended up here on a ship halfway across the world as a short-term volunteer with a hospital ship organization called Mercy Ships. It was going to be great, just a few months of travel, a few months helping them out in their off-season. I specifically picked the 3 months they weren't going to be in Europe, that they were going to be in Europe, because I really didn't want anything to do with Africa. But adventure always has a mind of its own. I tried to go home and I was miserable there. I no longer fit. Next thing I knew, I was back on that ship headed south to Africa as a long-term volunteer. When you become part of something bigger than you are, it will take you places that you could not have imagined. So there I was in West Africa, a graphic designer on a hospital ship. I ended up running the communications department, which is a miniature news team and a creative department. I wasn't medical in any way. In fact, I couldn't stand blood, and I was scared to death of Africa. But I learned that the best adventures are made up of the most difficult things. I never dreamed that I would spend 3 years on the coast of Sierra Leone, a war-torn country at the bottom of the UN Human Development Index. I saw and heard things that I didn't want to believe were real. And for much of that time, I kept myself at a distance, behind the scenes. But then I made a choice to build at least one relationship with an African before I left. I thought I could at least do that much. Little did I know that that one little person would change my life. This is Adam, an orphan baby with a cleft lip I met when he was 3 weeks old. Adam is his own adventure, and his story is too long to tell here. Today, he's a happy, healthy 10-year-old, and he lives in my hometown in Alaska, the adopted son of my childhood best friend, and a permanent part of my life. That ship was the place that connected me to everything since. It was hard to leave, but eventually I outgrew my role on board and moved to a land base in Switzerland to take on an international role as creative director. My job was to create communication materials for 13 nations in 7 languages. This was not an easy task. But there were some perks. I got to live here, in this storybook chateau on the edge of Lake Geneva in the French Alps. But the thing I learned most living in a foreign country is that it's very humbling. Every day you reach the limits of your communication and you find ways that you don't belong. But it's also very empowering. Every day you accomplish something you've never done before, and every day expands who you are. Switzerland was in some ways the opposite of Africa, but it was challenging in more invisible ways. After 5 years of trying to save the world, I knew it was time to go. But to where? I could try to go back, but I would never fit in those places again. Without exception, every time I've had to take a leap of faith, I've landed somewhere better than I could have dreamed up on my own. If I hadn't wanted to see Europe, I would never have ended up on a hospital ship, and I'd never have met the friends I eventually moved with to Washington, D.C. to freelance and start a hammock business. Had I never experienced a difficult ending that turned my life upside down, I might not have left D.C. and started to look for a place that felt like home. The good part about endings is that they always make way for something new. If you haven't figured it out by now, blue is one of my favorite things. From the beginning of my life, it's been the color that connects my worlds. Had I not had years of different worlds and wondering to think about what home felt like, I might not have recognized it when I came to Chattanooga. Adventure doesn't come through one giant step. It's 1,000 little decisions you make that add up to a journey. It's looking for the blue sky on ordinary days on any side of the globe. It's organizing a rainbow hammock flash mob on a bridge painted the perfect shade of blue. But the best part of an adventure is when you get to where you're going, for however short or long that might be. I'm all the places I've ever been, and I'm all the steps and detours I've taken. Had I missed one step, I might not have ended up right here. Chattanooga is not where I ever expected to end up at this point in my life, and that's why it's perfect.